Hey kids, today I'm going to show you how to make your very own terrarium, which is a small garden enclosed in a glass jar or vessel. You're going to need some simple materials which you can find around the house or outside in the garden, and you're also going to need mum and dad's help. So ask them to download this free activities sheet which is going to take you through step by step how to make your own terrarium. So let's get started. First thing you're going to need is your glass vessel. Now I've got an old pickle jar here. You need to give it a good rinse out just using water. You don't need to use any cleaning agent, and then make sure you wipe it round with a bit of kitchen roll just to get rid of any final little bits of dirt that are hiding in there. Make sure whichever glass vessel you choose has a nice lid. This one's got a cork lid. You can use a screw top lid. It doesn't matter, as long as there's a lid on there, that's perfect. Now I'm going to pop that to one side. The other utensils we're going to need today is something of a little bit of length which you can get to the bottom of your glass jar with. So for example, you could use a knitting needle, you could use a long spoon here, I think they're called a Knickerbocker Glory spoon, you could use a long paintbrush, or just a simple stick from the garden. This has come out of a plant, something like that. It doesn't matter what it is as long as you can get to the bottom of your terrarium. A couple of other things you're going to need from around the house or outside in the garden is a metal sieve. Now ideally you want a gardening sieve for this. You don't want to use mum and dad's food sieve because it is going to be getting quite dirty. And then we're also going to need a bowl of water. Ideally if you can get rainwater, that's great. If not, just tap water is fine. The next step is to get outside in the garden and collect a few materials from there. So let's grab mum and dad and get outdoors. If you head outside to either mum or dad's driveway, you will see on the floor they'll most likely have this kind of gravel, which is perfect for what we're looking for because it's really small, it's tiny little pieces, which is perfect for your terrarium. So you want to grab your shovel and get some of that together, ready to go in your sieve and have a rinse. Before you give your gravel a rinse in your sieve, make sure you're using an outdoor sieve, not mum and dad's food sieve, and just check through it to make sure there's nothing in there that we don't want to be mixed in with the gravel. So anything that's like a stick or something that's not gravel, any stones that are perhaps a little bit too big, get rid of those. Give it a good sort out, and then we'll give it a rinse through with the hose. I'd recommend doing this outside with a hose because it can get quite messy. Just make sure you get any dirt or grit or any little imperfections off your gravel so it looks nice and clean, ready to go in the bottom of your terrarium. The next thing you need to find is some really nice soil. Now check with mum or dad where you can dig this up before you go digging about in the garden, but we're looking for some nice slightly damp soil. You're going to get your spade, you're going to have a little dig, and what we're going to do is make sure there's no stones or any other bits and pieces in there before we pop it in our terrarium. Now one other thing we need to get from the garden is a small plant. There's lots of different plants that you can use, but I'm actually here by this ivy bush and I found a tiny little baby ivy here which I'm actually going to dig up. Ivy work really well in terrariums, so if you can find one then perfect. So what you're going to want to do is dig just down around near the roots. Give it a wiggle and you'll see they'll come out, hopefully with a few little baby roots on. That one might not be the best one. Let's see if this one's any better. Okay, so this one's definitely got a few little roots on. You can see he's only a tiny little thing, but that's all we need for our terrarium, something just like that. Now, one of the harder things to find for our terrarium is going to be moss. This is what we're looking for. It's a soft, squishy green plant that is really quite hard to find in some gardens, but it likes dark, damp places. So I'm looking here at the bottom of this flint wall that we have in our garden, and I found these two pieces here, so I'm going to take one of those to pop in our terrarium. While you're hunting around your garden for the other bits and pieces, keep an eye out for any nice big round stones that you find like these, because they're going to be perfect to decorate your terrarium at the end. Now, we should have everything we need to start putting our terrarium together. Step one is to take the lid off, make sure it is nice and clean and there's no water hanging around in the bottom there. And then we're going to get our gravel that we've cleaned and pop that in the bottom. Now you're going to want to do this handful by handful, and it is going to be a bit messy. So you might want to be doing this outside, or at least at a table where it doesn't matter if we get a little bit of mud and muck everywhere. About that much is the right amount for the bottom. Give it a little shake and make sure it's nice and level, and then we can start putting in the soil. We're going to take it handful by handful, and this time very gently just pour that in as well. Now hopefully if you've got small hands, you'll be able to get your hand inside the jar and pop it in nice and evenly across the top. But if we haven't got small hands, or hands small enough to fit in your glass jar, this is where one of your utensils is going to come in handy. So I'm going to use this spoon just to move the soil around evenly. You're going to want to fill the terrarium about halfway, perhaps just under half, depending on the height of your jar. Now again, this will also depend on how big your plant is. Be careful when you're filling this up, because you want to make sure that you leave enough space for your plant to sit in there just nicely, so you can measure it from the outside and make sure he's still got enough space once you've planted him on the inside, which we'll be doing in a minute. So I'm nearly there. I've got about, I'd say, just under half filled with soil. I'm just going to put one more little handful in. Then I'm going to use my spoon just to spread that evenly out across the top. And there we have it, the two layers. So we've got the gravel on the bottom and the soil on top of that. Now I'm going to actually use my paintbrush, because you can see on the edges of the glass there is some muck that's got stuck on the edges. I'm just going to use this paintbrush to actually clean it down a little bit, just so it looks a little bit neater. The next step is to pop the plant inside the glass. But what we're going to do just beforehand is we're going to take our bowl of water and we're going to take our piece of moss that we found earlier in the garden, and we're actually going to pop that straight into the water. Just give it a little dunk and let him soak for a little while. So while we're popping the plant in here, he can be soaking and getting lots of nice moisture inside him. I'm going to take this little ivy, which I dug up earlier. You can see the little roots are still here on the bottom. I'm going to get my spoon again and make a hole right in the middle of the terrarium. Now you want the hole to be around 1 inch deep, so just enough for his roots to fit in. I'm going to pop him inside, and then again using my spoon I'm just going to press the soil around the edges so that he's nice and supported in there. Now I'm going to give you a view inside the terrarium so you can see what I mean. Now you've got your plant in place. He should be sitting just nicely right in the middle. If you want to add another one, you can. I did actually dig up a couple more small ones just here, so I'm going to add those as well in the middle next to the other one that I've already put in. It's really important that you make sure all of the roots of the plant are hidden under the soil. If any of them are on the top of the soil, they'll get burnt by the sun and the plant will die. So just be careful to make sure they're all hidden underneath. Now we've got our plants in place, here comes the fun bit. We get to decorate the rest of the terrarium. Now you might want to take your moss from earlier, and now he's nice and soaked. Give him a really good squeeze, just like a sponge. And you can see he still looks in perfect shape as he was earlier, but now he's nice and damp. And we're going to want to lay him onto the soil. So he doesn't need to be planted, he literally just needs to be laid on top of the soil. I'm going to pop him in there. Be careful not to crush the plants that you already have in. And again, take one of your tools just to make sure you get him nicely in place. Next, you may remember those stones that we found earlier, the nice big round ones that look really pretty. We're going to add those in as well. I like to put them next to the moss, but it's up to you where you put them. Now you may want to add a little bit more gravel. So the gravel that we had in the bottom, this smaller stuff, you may want to add a little bit of it on the top as well, just to create a little bit of interest. Once you've finished adding in all of your decorations, you're going to want to grab some more kitchen roll and just give the outside a nice wipe over, because by now I'm sure it's probably covered in a little bit of mud, a little bit of water. And then if you can, also just get around the inside of the glass, at least at the top, to give it a little bit more of a clean. And then one of the final things you may want to add, and this is just for fun, is a tiny toy dinosaur or something similar to make it look more like a jungle. So that's it. Well done. You've completed your terrarium. I really hope you enjoyed making them. They're great fun to make and relatively easy as well, as I'm sure you found out. Now, to keep this guy alive is quite easy. They're pretty self-sufficient. What you need to do is make sure you put him somewhere which is not in the full sun, but in a nice bright position. You also need to keep it away from any radiators in your home because the heat of the radiator will kill the plants inside. You don't really need to water them because they will look after themselves. The water in the moss and the soil in the gravel that we popped in earlier, they are all going to evaporate that water. As the light comes through the glass, they all get rid of their water through evaporation, which then sticks on the side of the glass, which is called condensation. The condensation then drips down the edges of the glass, goes back into the soil, and then waters the plants. And that cycle goes round and round and round every single day. So you don't really need to water these unless you notice that it's particularly dry in there, in which case you can take the lid off and pop a little water in. If you have any other questions about terrariums, please do not hesitate to get in touch. I'm always available to answer questions about the plants, about the environment. There is one thing which people may ask, which is to do with what we've put inside the terrarium, because when you make terrariums traditionally, you always add in some of this, which is activated charcoal. Now, I haven't added anything in today because I specifically wanted to make a workshop which was centered around finding things in your garden or at home. You don't have to buy anything, you don't have to spend any money. However, not putting charcoal in here may reduce the life of your terrarium over time. However, this is available to buy on my website. If you did want to add some in, all you have to do is mix it in with the soil and it helps keep your plants healthier for longer. Other than that, everything can be found easily at home and costs nothing, and I hope you've had a great time. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be doing some more videos soon. Take care.